皆様、改めましておはようございます。本日は早朝よりのご参加、またご視聴いただきましてありがとうございます。ただいまから JHVS ジャパンヘルスケアベンチャーサミット2023シンポジウム、医療系ベンチャーアカデミアのためのシンポジウム、エコシステムの最前線、あなたの戦略はを開会いたします。申し遅れましたが、本日の司会を務めさせていただきます。青山理香と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。さて、本シンポジウムでは、国内の医療系ベンチャーが保有する優れたシーズやアイデアなどの実用化を加速させ、エコシステムの波に乗ることができるよう支援することを目指しまして、医療系ベンチャー支援の施策の紹介、業界の動向やエコシステムに関する発表、パネルディスカッションなどの意見交換を予定しております。それでは早速ですが、まずはじめに、厚生労働省、厚生労働大臣、政務官、塩崎昭久様より開会のご挨拶を頂戴したいと存じます。それでは塩崎様よろしくお願いいたします。
皆様おはようございます。厚生労働大臣政務官の塩崎昭久でございます。今日はジャパンヘルスケアベンチャーサミットのシンポジウムに大勢の皆様お越しいただきまして本当にありがとうございます。この試み、今お話がありましたように日本から医療系のベンチャーにどんどん世界に羽ばたいていただく。そんなことで昨年2023年に行われたジャパンヘルスケアベンチャーサミット、そこでの議論を踏まえて今日はシンポジウムという形で皆様と行わせていただきます。本日大勢の方にご参加いただきまして、またセッションの合間合間にはネットワーキングの時間も設けておりますので、ぜひまた今日から新しいネットワークと新しいアイデアがたくさん生まれてくることを心から期待をしております。政府としてましても、このスタートアップの支援、まさに国家政策のど真ん中に今位置づけて力を入れております。2022年から岸田内閣では、スタートアップ5カ年計画ということで、これから5年間でスタートアップに流れ込むお金の量を10倍にしていく。そして将来的には日本からユニコーンを100社以上生み出していこうじゃないか。こういう大変野心的なプロジェクトを今進めているところでございます。でも皆さん、いろんなスタートアップの分野がある中で、やはりこの医療を中心とするヘルスケアの分野、最も可能性のある分野の一つだというふうに思っております。日本は世界の中でも超高齢化ということは、最もたくさんの社会課題を抱えている国でもあります。そこに新しい世界に通用するようなビジネスモデルが生まれてくるたくさんのチャンスがあるはずです。そしてもう一つは、今厚労省を中心に政府全体で進めている医療 DX 構想の中で、医療から介護まで様々なデータがついに一元化されて、そして一次利用、二次利用できる、そんな新しい社会がやってこようとしております。この医療の世界がスタートアップの皆さんにとっても単に市場のメカニズムだけじゃなくて、規制のあり方、ルールのあり方が密接にビジネスに関わってくる。そんな世界だからこそ、厚生労働省としてもしっかりこれを体制として応援していきたい。そんな思いを込めて、ちょうど先週、この厚労省で私をチームリーダーといたしまして、ヘルスケアスタートアップを進行するための新たなプロジェクトチームを立ち上げました。このプロジェクトチーム、この下では、バイオ再生、メドテク、医療機器サムディ、そして AI、医療 DX、介護テック、4つのタスクフォースを設けまして、それぞれの政策をこれから半年間をかけて進めていきたいと思っております。今日、このシンポジウムにもご参加をいただいております、本庄さんに座長になっていただきまして、他にも委員の方として、曽山さん、奥田さん、そして鍵本さん、皆さんも参加をいただいて、 まさに素晴らしい政策をこれから作っていこうと思っております。またこのプロジェクトチームでは、広く国民の皆様からも様々な政策アイデアを募集をしております。ヘルスタアイデアボックスということでですね、ぜひ皆さんこちらの QR コード、今、スマートフォンをお持ちの方は写メで撮っていただければ、こちらからどなたでも政策提案とか課題提言、こういったものがしていただける形になっております。新しくオープンな形で政策を皆さんから受け付けながら、しっかりとスタートアップがもっと活躍できる土俵を作っていきたい。また、そのスタートとして今日、いろいろなシンポジウムの中でのご意見も取り込んでいきたいと思っております。今日一日皆様にとって素晴らしい、実り大きい議論の一日になりますことを心から記念いたしまして、参加いただいて皆様への感謝を込めて開会の挨拶をさせていただきます。ありがとうございます。
塩崎様、ありがとうございました。続きまして、キーノートパネル、医療系ベンチャー海外進出の地図を描くと題しまして、2人の登壇者によるレクチャー及びディスカッションを行ってまいります。このプログラムは、医療系ベンチャーが海外進出する際に求められるテーマについて、海外で活躍してきた登壇者に議論を深めていただきまして、海外戦略策定のヒントを得ることを目的としております。それでは本プログラムの登壇者をご紹介いたします。カリフォルニア大学バークレー校ニューロテックコライダーラボディレクター、エンサンテファウンダー兼 CEO、ゲイル・ギャノン様です。そして、サバンティア CEO、クローディア・ミッチェル様。以上お二方にレクチャー及びパネルディスカッションを行っていただきます。そしてモデレーターは株式会社ヘリオス代表執行役社長 CEO、株式会社パワー X 創業者取締役会長、鍵本忠久様にお務めいただきます。鍵本様、よろしくお願いいたします。
ありがとうございます。よろしくお願いします。それから皆様、休日の朝にお集まりいただきましてありがとうございます。今日のこのセッションはですね、我々日本国というところに多くの方が生まれ、そして会社を経営する中でですね、いかにしてこのヘルスケアの事業を成功に導くかどうか。で、特に残念ながら日本という国家というものは今人口も減少しており、市場が縮小傾向でございます。特にバイオ医領域では、疾患というものは世界に通じますので、それをいかにスケールアップしていくか。そのためには世界、もう具体的には米国ですね。米国市場での成功というものが必須に構造的になってまいります。その中で今日ですね、2名のパネリストの方からその内容に関しまして様々な議論ができればと思っております。自己紹介というか、紹介に関しましては、パネリストに関しては、プレゼンテーションの中に入っておりますので、それでは手短ではございますが、早速、このプレゼンテーションに入っていきたいと思います。それではよろしくお願いします。スライド出ますでしょうか。
Good morning and good afternoon for those who are hearing in different places. My name is Gail Gannon. Can you hear me all right? Is that a yes? Okay. So with that, I'm just going to let you know that these slides I will be making available to all attendants. So please feel free to not worry about taking any pictures or otherwise. I'm going to quickly go through this, but the whole idea is to help provide an opportunity for you to experience some of the things that we think about as we're looking for companies to fund and considerations for funding. And so with that, I'm just going to go through this. All right, so the most important two messages I'd like to take away here is talking about both context as well as what I would say is developing the entrepreneur's DNA. So let's talk about context quickly. One of the most important aspects when looking at the US market is looking at it in respect to what I would call market shifts or experiences that are happening in the current events, whether it's fiscal, economic, cultural, or even environmental. And that's the big takeaway for this particular emphasis. The other thing to consider is also looking at market timing. That's super important. I just gave you several examples here, whether it's Airbnb or Uber. They in themselves did not actually create technology. What they did was they recognized that there was confluences of technology and also cultural shifts, one of which was the ubiquity of having a mobile device, that there was availability of the GPS, and there was also a cultural shift in what we call the sharing economy. And so let's just take a quick look at what's happened in post-pandemic market breakers. One of the things that we're all experiencing is the future of work has changed dramatically. And with that future work, it's also going to be a shift in how we do our work. And so whether that is on the end of supply chain or looking at technology that will enable and augment the changes in the work environment and work demands, or whether it's even drastic shifts in what technology or solutions are currently in market that are really don't quite fit the future work or the future work in the next 10 to 20 years. And so one of the things that I would ask all of us to consider is while Japan and the US are very strong, what I would call developed markets, I would also ask you to consider looking at some of the emerging demographics and changes in their populations. For example, in South Korea and Taiwan are one of the significantly fastest growing emerging economies in the world. And so what does that do in terms of changing the paradigm of how we do work in the future and where we get our talent and resources? The Sustainable Development Goals are becoming more pertinent. Coming off the World Economic Forum, there's a high interest in looking at how technology we bring to market and how those technologies actually impact some of the Sustainable Development Goals, because that actually is one of the keys for your company's surviving. And so I was asked to talk about some current trends. Some of them, as you know, is data science, particularly around quantum computing, which I'm quite bullish about. I think that there's an opportunity to leverage quantum computing, not because of looking at some of the biological sort of mimicry, particularly around looking at energy transference and sensors and processes and informatics, but also in terms of enhancing drug discovery approaches and diagnostics. We can't talk without any discussion these days without actually mentioning artificial intelligence and leveraging big data. Just going to give you some examples of some companies who actually closed some very large rounds in the middle of the pandemic. And then many of you who are in the audience, I would imagine, are very much what we call digital natives. So the ubiquity of digital media is very important, and how that plays a significant role in your go-to-market strategy. And even and prior to that is getting a better sense and learning about the target populations for whom you're wanting to serve. We've all seen the explosion of applications of ChatGPT, everything from how to help improving clinical experiences between providers and their patients and families, to actually looking at that as using this technology to leverage for clinical trials as well. So there's lots of questions about that. And one of the things I want to call out, if we hadn't thought about it, is that the acceleration of AI technology is moving at a pace far exceeds, in many cases, what we might consider policies and regulatory environment. And that's something that I think one of the things, as I said, as both very developed markets, that we need to actually revisit and look to government for guidance on how we look at what kinds of regulations make the most sense to ensure that the technology that's developed as a product of these open AI, generative AI, can actually provide information that is both informative but also inclusive. The big players, we all know them. There's Gamma. I mentioned NVIDIA because, as you can all see, they all have some kinds of strategies in the healthcare or health tech market. And if you're looking at market trends, I would strongly suggest that you watch what they're doing, talking about Amazon and online pharmacy, the Apple Watch, they're leveraging, using that in terms of actually measuring biometrics and how to extend biometrics, cloud for Google, and using that for helping to decrease the burden of healthcare administration. And then Microsoft next, and using that as a way to help enhance training opportunities and leveraging artificial intelligence and data. So one of the big themes right here is talking about the fact that there is a lot of interest and there is particular growth in the health and wellness space. I didn't say biotech. I was very clear about trying to emphasize that, and particularly around the area of quantified self. Digital phenotype is something near and dear to my heart. I do believe that there is now convergence of using both biometrics as well as leveraging machine learning and looking at the environment as a way to gather what we typically consider disparate information, and how do you collide that information together to enhance most personalized medicine and more dynamic delivery of healthcare. So let's just quickly jump over in terms of Silicon Valley way of entrepreneurship DNA, right? Most importantly, whether you're in Japan or United States, is what do you do to create value? So you're asking yourself, in any cases, especially in the US market, because it's a highly regulated market, you're going to begin with the end in mind. And so in the care of healthcare, is how do you get your technology to best serve your patients? That is the end in mind. And so with that, one of the most important aspects is understanding the payer reimbursement landscape, and to develop this understanding fairly early on, even before you even think about commercialization, is very much about how people are going to pay for your solution or services. On top of that, in parallel, having an early regulatory strategy. And what people don't often realize, particularly in the United States, as mentioned, that not only are we a highly regulated market in the FDA space, but if you're looking at deploying technology that had maybe a blend of a digital diagnostic or digital therapeutics, there are other agencies to also consider, whether it's the Federal Communications Commissions or even OSHA. So there are additional regulatory agencies that you also have to be in compliance with, and that's an additional strategy that one would have to consider when coming to market. Design thinking, many of you know, one of the things I want to emphasize is the fact that empathy is the most important skill set that any leadership needs to cultivate. Empathy means that being able to understand and get into not only the heads of your customer, but the hearts of your customers. In the case of the United States, many of our technology, our medical technology, is actually covered under payers. So the user and the customer are very different. And often is the case, payers are the customers, and the users are the people who benefit from the technology. So my message, be like water. So what does that mean? That means that there's a mind shift that you have to cultivate. Looking at developing this North Star philosophy, meaning that there's abundance of opportunities. We are now in what I would say impending recession, we're definitely in inflation. And as a product of that, there's going to be a diminished amount of capital. So you have to be very thoughtful, but not also feel so constrained. And in fact, in many ways, I would suggest to you that when you're looking at developing your technology and deploying it, is to really stay focused, very, very focused on what you're trying to provide, and understanding where your core competencies lie and where your core competencies don't lie. And where your core competencies don't lie, then look at opportunities for partnership. And in fact, I would suggest that's actually a very good way of extending your capital runway and having people who have other core competencies to help develop your technology. Let me just go back one again. And I want to talk about looking at your teams. This is something that I know that in Japan, having worked there, and I have actually coached and mentored many Japanese startups since 2014. And one of the biggest challenges in sort of the culture and organizational structure is to go from a vertical to going to more flat, and empowering your employees to give them both the autonomy and agency and responsibilities to make decisions that they would typically make, and to be less vertically integrated, but be more horizontally integrated. And that gives them the opportunity to make rapid decisions and making them dynamic. This is one of the ultimate takeaways about Silicon Valley, this whole pay it forward philosophy. When you come to visit here, we are all very giving. We are very giving without not necessarily wanting anything in return. Many of us benefited from having wonderful mentors and advisors. We know that our success is very much dependent on the backbone of other people having supported us. So we ask and we encourage many of the Japanese biotech companies to develop their networks early. And the beauty of having the online resources now is you can participate in advance virtually if you can't be here in present. And so my takeaway messages here, some of the leadership qualities that I strongly enforce is learning how to trust yourself, trust others, be unapologetically honest, which is sometimes very difficult among Asian cultures because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And at the same time, know that there's a pay it forward philosophy where we are very much open doors, develop a learner's curiosity, collaborate more than compete. You will find shockingly that when you meet many investors here, they will not sign an NDA because we all develop a mindset that our reputation is more important than anything else. And so we have a high level of trust, regardless of any kinds of paper. And then also develop an intolerance for uncertainty and risk. And that's super important, especially in this market. And really cultivate a sense of resilience in your team. So with that, I strongly encourage that you look for the golden crane, regardless of all the challenges that are going on in market here. So this is my background. I've been working in the health tech business for over 20 years. I've been working with many Japanese companies, startups since 2014. It's been very much a pleasure. And I hope that you'll reach out to me. My open door invitation, it's QR code to link in with me. And that's my direct information. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Gail. 非常に広い視点に立ったUS のスタートアップの現状、それからそこにサポート体制に含めてですね、いろいろ議論をいただきました。で、次のクラウディアの紹介を少しだけ日本語で差し上げたいんですが、非常にユニークなバックグラウンドを持っておりまして、私が本業でやっておりますヘリオス社の iPS の領域であるんですが、iPS 細胞を遺伝子改変して、ユニバーサルセル化するということを世界で初めてやる会社を創業されました。で、詳しくは本人から話がありますけども、その会社はプラットフォームなわけですね。で、ベンチャーキャピタルからほとんどお金を集めずに、会社を成長させて、で、最終的に日本のアステラス製薬に、最大額約100ミリオンでの売却を、しまして、その後エグジットした後ですね、アステラスの唯一の女性執行役として、日本で数年間経験をされた方になります。今回のトピックに関して日本企業が海外に出るにというのはありますが、逆の視点でですね、アメリカのバイオベンチャーが日本の会社にエグジットして、さらに日本の環境で仕事をしてますので、そういったところで我々にとって示唆に踏むものになればと思って今日登壇をしております。Thank you, Claudia.
皆様、本日はお越しくださいましてありがとうございます。Sorry, I will have to switch to English because my Nihongo is not very good. But so I would like to start to tell you today the story of how I became an entrepreneur from starting my career in academia. So if we can have the slides, as we can, thank you. So how did I become an entrepreneur? As I said, I had very early on decided to be a researcher, a geneticist when I was young. And I followed that path for many, many years to become an academic researcher. So I did all the education necessary to become an academic researcher. I did bachelor's, master's, PhD, postdoctoral fellowship in the US. And then I applied I did a national competition in France. to become a tenured academic researcher at INSERM, the NIH of France. So I was a researcher there for a few years, but I realized that something was missing. I was feeling like I was not having an impact in society as much as I wanted. So I had stability. I had a job for life. It was predictable. I had my research lab. I was doing my research. I was publishing in great journals like Nature Medicine, Nature Biotech, and others. But I was lacking the excitement. I needed something else. I wanted to be closer to developing medications and changing people's lives. So I decided to jump from my comfortable position. And while I was still winding down my lab at INSERM, I did an executive MBA that opened up my mind to the industry and to biotech. I realized that I had the DNA of an entrepreneur, like Gail just said, cultivate your entrepreneur's DNA. And what do I mean by the DNA of an entrepreneur? I was determined, passionate. I'm a risk taker. I love to learn. I'm adaptable. And I think that the most important quality of an entrepreneur is to be resilient. So to always to continue, never give up, right? And so a few years later, I went back to the US, where I had contacts, and networking, as you will see, is a key thing for establishing yourself overseas. I had a network in Seattle, Washington, and that's where I started my entrepreneurial career. I co-founded a company with a colleague there on the RNAi drugs. So we were developing RNAi drugs, and it was 2008 and 2009. So I was still in Paris working, both in my lab and starting the company. And then in 2009, I moved to Seattle to take on the scientific officer role. But as you might remember, 2008, 2009 was a very tough period. We had a very big economic crisis in the US. So it was not very easy to fundraise, especially we were just starting. We had very little data. It was very early stage biotech company, but I learned a lot. So it was a platform technology. We were developing new novel antibiotic drugs using RNAi, but it was very early stage, so it was very hard to raise capital for the company. We did some partnerships, but we ended up pivoting from developing therapeutics to developing agricultural products against pests. So I decided to move on to my next role. I created a medical research program for a nonprofit. So I was also continuing to building my network there in Seattle. But I always wanted to develop my entrepreneurial dream. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start a new company. So I learned a lot from the first one. I know what to do, what not to do, maybe. So at that point, I wanted to start a new company, and I met a researcher at the University of Washington who had a very fascinating novel technology to make iPSCs or pluripotent stem cells universally compatible. So we had universal donor cell technology, and we wanted to commercialize that. So I co-founded Universal Cells with my partner at the University of Washington. So we spun out the company from the university, and we were making stem cells compatible with everyone. So as I said, it's a one universal donor cell that could be applied to many indications. So we had this platform technology that was very interesting, and we could leverage it in many ways. So we started by establishing partnerships with companies with complementary technologies, and one of each was Helios, and Kagimoto-san was one of our early partners, and it was a very nice collaboration we had. And those collaborations helped us bring validation to our technology, of course, revenues, and we were able to build capacity, and we were also developing our internal therapeutic program. And after a few years, in February 2018, Astellas acquired Universal Cells, and it was a quite successful exit. Just 4.5 years after I started the company, and it brought many, a 30 times return on investment for my investors. So it was quite successful. And after a year of doing the post-merger integration in Seattle, I moved to Tokyo, and I was senior vice president, portfolio strategy for Astellas, and it was I spent 3 years here. It was very nice. I had a wonderful 3 years here, and I was the first senior vice president woman at the headquarters, and the first senior vice president non-Japanese. So I was very proud to have been given this opportunity here, and very humbled to have spent these 3 years here in Tokyo. But after 3 years, I decided to move on because I'm an entrepreneur. I am not a corporate type. I wanted to move on to continue to build other things. And I not only moved on to new things, I moved to Switzerland. And I started a consulting company there where I do senior advisory work. And I'm a board member of a couple of companies, one private and one public company in France. And I'm also now about to start a new company that is still in stealth mode. And this time I'm the initial investor and chair of the company. And it's a little bit different from what I've done before, because I've been in the cell and gene therapy field for more than 25 years. But now I'm entering the preventative medicine space. And it's AI-based platform where we are integrating genomic data, trackers, and blood biomarkers to do predictive medicine. So it's very exciting new field, and a little bit on the same vein of things that Gail was just speaking about. So AI-based startup. And so a couple of take-home messages here. So as I said in the beginning, I had a plan. I wanted to become a academic researcher. You think that everything is going to be straightforward, but life is not like that. You have ups and downs, and things don't work like you envisioned, but that's normal, and that's healthy too. So it's been a great ride, and it's nice to not know what it's gonna come next. So you're always surprised, and it's delightful. And the second take-home message here is I think that networking is the key to success in going to the US and building companies. And I think that, for example, my first thing is to master good communication skills in English. I'm not an English native speaker. I'm French Brazilian, and so I've learned to speak good English, and I think that that was key, because building relationships is essential to many things. You're not gonna be in your corner and hope that people will come to you because you have the best technology. You have to go out and talk to people and show that you have the best technologies. It's not enough just to have the best science. You have to be able to go out and talk about the best science. And that every time you talk to one person, that person will remember that and will talk to another person, and that grows exponentially your network. So you really have to go out and talk to people. So attend as many conferences, workshops as possible. So, build your network. Reach out to potential collaborators or partners. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. Be proactive. Pitch to US-based VCs, not only to, of course, try to raise money, but also because they have good networks. They can put you in contact with partners. They can open their network to you as well. So talk to different people. And the last thing I think it's very important is that the Japanese government has several initiatives that are very helpful, and I had the chance to talk, for example, to the people in Accenture Ventures who are building the Japan Innovation Campus in Silicon Valley. So they have a lot of good resources for Japanese companies. So tap into those things. I know that there is a session later today on the government programs. I think that is very important. They can really help you. It's hard enough to do it by yourself. So take advantage of the Japanese government programs. I think that will be a very it will make things a little bit easier. So, ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. We have several questions from the floor and also from the previous hearing. And the biggest question we have is, what should Japanese company do in the United States to be successful? And Claudia, you mentioned about the importance of networking, but the first problem would be communication. Maybe we should open up the MEDISO English class or something, but it's just a joke. But anyway, so you have interacted with several Japanese companies, right? As part of your first startup, second, and then as part of Astellas management team.
Yes.
What would you say? What should we do? What are we lacking except communication and networking?
Yes, I think that a solid VC community here in Japan is, I think that we have a lot of corporate VCs in very strong corporate VCs in Japan. I think that independent VCs, I think, are not as common, and so I think that building up the VC community here, I think that will be helpful. And I think that also fostering the entrepreneurial spirit. I think that in Japan, people tend to have more of a corporate type of mentality rather than entrepreneurial. So I think that making sure that people understand that that's positive. So having those government initiatives, I think it's very healthy, because people will understand that, okay, this is an important path. This is good for the country. I won't be treated badly if I fail. So making sure that failing is okay too. It's part of the process, and you won't be viewed badly. You won't lose face if you fail in your first startup, like I did. My first startup didn't work out, but I learned so much from that experience that helped me go and build a successful company after that. So changing that mentality, making sure that you're not going to be judged just because you failed once, you're not good. So it's the person who built FedEx, for example, they failed twice before they build a successful company and the third time. So it's important to show people that it's okay to fail as well. It's part of the learning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gail, do you have any opinion? You have been interacting with Japanese companies, right? Especially startups.
I've been working with Japanese startups since 2014. So I have a few years.
So what are they lacking? Why they cannot be so successful? What's your view?
Sure. So let me reinforce some of the things that Claudia had said. We have observed that there needs to be, I would say, a stronger angel and strategic venture network that does not exist in Japan right now. The majority of the support comes from CVCs and corporate venture capitalists. While that's important, often is the case in early stage, either biotech or medtech companies, a lot of when support comes that way, it's coming from a particular portfolio or pipeline direction. And when you're a new startup, you want to be able to explore different opportunities. And so sometimes when you have a corporate venture capitalist that is one of your main supporters in your development, it can sometimes sway the direction and it doesn't often give you the opportunity to explore. So in the case of Claudia was speaking with iPSCs and progenitor cells, in the early days, there was many opportunities in which you could apply to, and there were very limited ventures actually in that space because it was such a new science. And in some respects, having not had those ventures, it gave her sort of the freedom to sort of determine what that business model and platform looks like, which is, I applaud you. That's a good thing. With regards to some of the other points that I mentioned earlier, and I want to reinforce it, is that when even in a startup, there's still this sense of building something that's organizational structure that's vertical. It needs to be as flat as possible. And that's hard to do while scaling. And it requires a cultural shift, a mind shift, and making sure that you give your early employees, your founders, the opportunity and autonomy to make decisions with the resources they need to make some important decisions. That will help in terms of rapid development cycle. That also help in terms of being able to attend to different development aspects that unparalleled. So I mentioned regulatory market, super important. I mentioned payer reimbursement, right? And I also mentioned clinical. So let me reinforce that I didn't say earlier. When I talk about a clinical pathway, and to Claudia's point, again, reinforcing, not only do you network with investors, but you also network with partners, people who can co-develop your technology, or people who are in adjacent technologies can be very helpful. And one more thing to add to that is to seek what I would call key opinion leaders or subject matter experts in the domain in the US to bring them on board as early advisors can be very, very helpful because they're the ones that are going to inform clinical workflow. They are the decision makers in many cases, and that's what the paradigm looks like. Albeit I do see a shift in focusing on more self-care, and there's this more of a direct-to-consumer wellness side of it. But when you're talking about more traditional biotechnology, medtech, where there's a regulatory component and a very strong payer incentive, you need to get those clinicians on early.
Thank you very much. So you both emphasize the importance of VC community, right? And I realize the same thing. In Japan, most of the VCs are CVCs, or there are some independent ones still, but still the mindset is still kind of employee mindset. They are not like, they don't have hunting mode. if you have hunting mode, you're going to go out and find the best opportunity and try to dominate the cap table and take it all, right? And with US VCs, I see so many of them have the mindset of hunting spirit, right? They're almost like a big mafia. They're going to pick 3 major companies in the United States. Each of VCs is going to dominate these companies. For example, CAR-T, there were 3 main players. These companies were controlled by major VCs. And they're going to push and they're going to kill other competitors in some way, right? The other venture companies are kind of dried up. But the major players going to get the product approved and sold to mega pharma. But the real player seems to be the VC rather than the venture company itself. But we don't have that firepower or greed in a good way, right? I think that's a missing piece in Japan. But am I right, Gail? What do you think?
Well, one of the things that we're hoping to do, and actually my team has been involved with, is taking successful entrepreneurs such as Claudia and helping them develop an angel network. That
Right.
they are often very much fuel, because one of the biggest challenges that happens in Japan, and not just Japan, but in many other countries, for example, like Germany and France, is that a lot of the startup companies, what we call grantpreneurs, right?
Mhm.
They continue to get grants and they live off of grants. And
Right.
And one of the challenges is, how do you move away from that grantpreneur mindset and really try to fast track your companies, and without having that angel network to help sort of close the gap between grants and venture capital, where they need to have certain inflection or milestone points.
Right.
It's very difficult, right? Because even in this market, I would say that some of the ventures are realizing that they need to look a little bit more upstream and even consider
Right.
looking at earlier stage technology. But then the cost of capital, right? That's the biggest issue. The cost of capital is now more expensive for everyone.
Right. But then the flip side of that is some VCs see business opportunities, and if there's a trend, they're going to hunt for it and then put tons of money, right? And then push it forward. But also I realized that the even US VC cannot, make the right decision of what opportunity will be the right opportunity to make an investment, right? If there's a trend, they're going to jump in. But for example, a company like Universal Cells, which was a platform technology, and then back then IPSL was in a way too early, and then creating a platform company is a little bit too early too, right? But the flip side is Claudia, successfully developed the company without any dilution from venture capitalists. And I remember the conversation back then, these days, you guys were annoyed with US VCs, right?
Yeah, it was being at the right place at the right time. Actually, it was a little bit early, but it was the right moment, because companies were realizing that they needed a second generation universal donor cell, and there was nothing out there. And as Hardy mentioned, I didn't raise VC money. I raised angel money. I raised only $300,000, and then I leveraged the relationship, the collaborations, the partnerships, and that's where we had the money to develop our internal programs. So I ended up not having to raise venture capital, because I leveraged the platform to bring in revenues and then do our own research. But it was the right moment to partner with the companies, because we had the technology that nobody else had. Then people all copied what we were doing, but at that moment we were alone in the space, and we were able to establish the partnerships and leverage that to avoid having to raise capital. I agree with you that there is not only positive things that come from having a VC on your board and your cap table. They can be quite, for an entrepreneur, they can be quite aggressive. They can take over control. I've had colleagues of mine who were CEOs of companies that were controlled by VCs, and they were fired, and so it's not always positive. So you have to also be sure when you raise money with VCs, that you're raising from VCs who have the same vision that you have. They align with what you want to do with the technology, because otherwise you're going to get the money, but then you're going to not be able to develop what you were thinking, and maybe you're going to be out of the startup. So it's a two-way thing.
Thank you. And then I'd like to discuss another model in the United States, which is quite interesting. So the other day, Michael Langer, the son of Bob Langer, came to Japan, and I had the opportunity to have a drink with him. And then he was, I believe, chief business officer of Pear Therapeutics, which is SAMD company. That's how we call it here. And we're going to talk about SAMD's opportunity later. But he was telling me that his father started 40 companies. And out of 40, 28 companies. So those who don't know Bob Langer, he's a founder of Moderna. And then I think most of us injected the product, right? So anyways, out of 40, 28 companies went public or acquired. That's a great track record. And it's a very big machine he built. He taught so many students, and they are now independent PIs everywhere, all over the world. And then some of them are working for venture capital. And then anytime he starts a new company, there's somebody who knows Bob Langer really well and writes a check. And it's a big, big machine to create a new company and push it to the exit. And we don't have that model at all in Japan, right? We want to have great key opinion leader, great scientists who's keep on creating new IP, creating new companies, and everybody is willing to make an investment without checking what the business is, right? If you get there, it's going to be really strong machine. Then in United States, how do you view it? What's a process to build that kind of reputation? Do you have any view? Claudia, Gail?
Sure. Do you want to go first? Or
Go ahead.
So one of the interesting observations that you mentioned, and it would be really interesting to see how many degrees of Bob, and I really mean that. One of the benefits of having this kind of an ecosystem is that often it is true, success does breed success, because it starts with the mindset. So, for example, I'm going to take some bets on Claudia that her early hires, her early founders will also be just as successful because they cultivated both the mindset in terms of culture, but also in terms of how to do business. So one of the things that she mentioned, and she touched upon it lightly, but I want to emphasize it's super important, especially during this economy, during this sort of, I would say, somewhat skinny economy, is that you need to partner, right? Partner for co-development. Do not worry about your IP so much, because IP is great, but if you don't have anything in market, it doesn't matter. So I would strongly encourage early stage biotech companies to look at who your likely partners might be, where you have either adjacent technology, as Claudia's done, and actually they have a need, and help leverage. And there are some multinationals in Japan have accelerators. One of the biggest challenges with those accelerators is that they're moving at a different pace, and often again the technology is brought in for the intention of augmenting their portfolio. When you look for adjacent partners, right, then you very much follow along the visions of a platform, and those partnerships can be people for whom you can work on doing licensing agreements, which can actually, in some respects, leverage your technology and get you to a next inflection point that you wouldn't otherwise get to. And that's a nice place to be. And Claudia can talk more about this in detail, about having early big customers, and having those early customers extend her network in a way that she could otherwise do. And that's a really smart strategy.
And just to complete on the point of the networks and so Bob had that has the entrepreneurial spirit, right? Not all researchers, even in the U.S., are doing that, and so you have to find those talents who are open and have that kind of vision, and foster that. So I'm sure that there are people at Todai, University of Kyoto, and all the all the great universities that Japan has. Japan has very strong academic research. So look for those talents who want to do that. Not every academic researcher will be wanting to go and start companies, but some of them will if they're given the opportunity, and they can keep. Bob Langer kept his professorship at MIT. He didn't leave, but he was able to spin out a lot of companies. So give that possibility to academic researchers here in Japan to do that. For example, going beyond the United States, now I live in Switzerland. I see the ETH, which is a great university in Zurich. They have a lot of entrepreneurship there. They are also doing that kind of thing. They have they foster a lot of programs, from going from the lab to companies. They have an incubator. They have it's really cultivated. The mindset of spinning out companies is cultivated there. So I think that you have to make sure that the universities are understanding that they have to give the bandwidth to the professors and to foster that and to promote that within the university. And it's okay. For example, I feel like in France, for example, to contrast to ETH in Zurich, I think that the French academic system is not very good in fostering entrepreneurship. When I was a researcher there, people thought I was crazy that I was starting a company. And why are you doing that? You have a job for life. Why would you start a company? And you're going to the dark side. You're going to, you don't care about science. You care about money, which is not true. I cared about bringing science to the people, to medication. So I wanted to translate the research, right? So I think that it depends on the mindset. And it's very important that the universities are positive about entrepreneurship.
May I add to that, Claudia? That's a nice jumping off point.
Yes, please.
So, for example, at University of California, Berkeley, and actually, to be quite honest, it's actually going to be expanding to the other 10 universities. There's a whole change maker mindset wherein there are a number of classes that are given the same level of recognition, the same level of credentialing. And so, for example, in the University of California, I'm in an industry faculty, right? While I don't have a PhD, I have the business acumen, I have the success track record to demonstrate that I'm providing a different set of skills that most scientific and academic scientists do not have. And breathing that kind of life and providing the resources so that it affords the student a level of exposure that they wouldn't otherwise see. So how do you take basic research, bench research, and move it translational? And how do you move it translational to commercial? And on the campus, we have, for example, a handful of not only angel groups, we have venture groups, we have Skydeck, for example, all of which becomes this larger ecosystem. So we have a way to support not only faculty, but students who have novel ideas from cradle to crib, in essence, and give them the breadth and resources to do that. So we've been very, very active in moving that kind of ethos in the forefront, and actually, in some respects, tying it to the degree. So it's not just a standalone. It actually is very much integrated in terms of the kind of studies that we encourage our students to have going forward. So that's a very novel thing, and I'm really grateful to be part of that. And that's one of the reasons why I returned to academics.
That's
so I was
great.
in both camps, like you call it, both camps.
Yeah. So the other topic I want to discuss about is in modern days, today's world, the company can be run virtual, right? And then we still lack enough number and quality of entrepreneurs in Japan in this health tech field. And one of the hypothesis I have is, can we not bring US serial entrepreneurs and match them with Japanese technologies? And money follows people. Deal follows people. And then once we can bring in these successful serial entrepreneurs, it should move forward. And yesterday I was having one of the entrepreneurs from the United States, and actually he's moving to Japan. And he was living in Philly, and I was in Philly for a while, and we were talking about Kensington Street in Philadelphia, famous for Chinese food, but also famous for drug addicts. And the safety is not there already, right? The divide became really big in the United States, and some people feel it's not safe enough for them. And so there are two things they love about Japan. Japan is safe. Second, healthcare system is great, thanks to the Ministry of Health. In the United States, if you lose a job, you're dead. You cannot go to the hospital and get yourself cured. Maybe that's a great motivation for them to keep on running, keep on taking risks. But maybe at some point, people will get tired playing the game. If you can provide safe and nice environment like Japan, can we make sense? Can it work? Well, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that it's very important to be open to that kind of a change. I moved to Japan. I was very happy to live here, and I know that more and more after COVID, the remote type of work has really become ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So I think that being able to recruit globally is very important, and I think that it would be possible to have recruit entrepreneurs to either to work from Japan, but also working from the US and having their local network there as well. So it's very possible to build global companies, even if you're a startup nowadays. I'm my example of my new company. It's based in the US. I live in Switzerland. I have people. The team is mostly in Brazil. So it's like it's where your network is, where the talent is. You go and you know there are no barriers now, I think.
That's great. Gail, what do you think? Any opinion?
Yes, I wholly agree. One of the things that it will benefit from having a virtual company is that you do leverage the best of both, to the extent that you can ensure that you have a communication communication ecosystem that is robust. And I know there's pros and cons about being virtual versus in person, but to reinforce what Claudia said, one of the best things that happens as being comfortable with the future of work is that we do have more capable technology now. We have better or more enhanced, robust communication pathways and security and privacy, of course, notwithstanding. And so with that, you have the benefit of actually accessing talent in the world that you could otherwise access. So if you're talking about as an early stage startup and you're trying to leverage your resources and you have a certain amount of constrained resources, leveraging talent, for example, whether it's in Brazil or whether it's in US or whether it's in other countries, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's great.
That is one thing. Yeah. And then more importantly is that the fact that you can develop and cultivate local networkings or cross-border, what I call cross-border networking, which is really important, right? Because the United States is yes, while it's a very, very large market for the healthcare system, it may not be the first market for certain technologies. And so I would encourage the Japanese startups to not just look at one particular market, but look at the market that best fits where your technology is going to. So it might be places in the EU, it might be places in South America. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is that you can show commercial success and the health outcome of that your target patients and customers are significantly better. That's the win.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Then as an entree for the following sessions, I'd like to touch base with the SAMD technologies. And Claudia, you're starting sort of like AI space, right? And Gail, you have been helping some of the SAMD companies. In Japan now, there's a big shake is happening right now, whether it can be a viable business or not. And that's going to be the third session today. And from your perspective, there were some SAMD company in the United States, like Pear Therapeutics, didn't work well. How do you view the technology itself and the monetizing the business itself? Is it a matter of timing? If ChatGPT kicks in, can we change the model? What's the issue? You know, it's a promising area. Things are happening, but when and how can we monetize the business? Is it sustainable? What do you think?
Gail, do you want to start?
No. Sure. I'll give it a quickie, and then Claudia, please. I am optimistic about the opportunities of using software as both a medical device, as software as a diagnostic, and also as a therapeutic. In the case of Pear, and I actually, full disclosure, I'm quite familiar with Beth Rogosinski, who's the chief marketing officer. We're good friends, and so I can just be very honest with you that it wasn't that the technology was insufficient, not at all. It's market timing, one. And also, again, going back to my main tenet about beginning with the end in mind, you have to find some kind of a business model where you're going to be reimbursed. Or if not reimbursed, then you have to have a really clear idea how you're going to go to market in the direct to consumer, but understanding that there are some regulatory impediments about what you can claim. Right? So there's a trade-off. And I can tell you then my own experiences of working with these companies who are looking at software and how they might be able to move as a medical device. Some will actually go into more the direct to consumer without making the big claims about what the software is able to provide. What that can do in some respects, as you see in the difference between a nutraceutical and a pharmaceutical, is it might be able to provide some early indications where market is, and maybe even to give some hints about where those health outcomes would be most beneficial, and helps guide as you're developing your technological solutions and your business model where you might be best fit. And so I would draw the parallel between what nutraceutical companies do sometimes is leveraging that early signals and looking at customer base and how they leverage that and they move it toward pharmaceuticals. I would say the same kind of parallels.
No, absolutely. I also think that the reimbursement piece is key, because otherwise you only have anecdotal sales and you won't be able to get the volumes. But so, for example, in the new company we're creating, we're deciding to adopt a B2B model because it's easier to monetize. You have more targeted towards clinicians, physiotherapists, and nutritionists, so it's easier to target the audience, and also for the payers, we have a very clear structure there. So a B2C model in that sense is quite hard, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's the time is up soon. But again, thank you very much for your input. And then we wish that Japan will be able to play a key role in the global healthcare system. And in order to do that, we have to globalize the companies and aim US market and bring successfully the product to the US market. So as one of the conclusion we have is all about network and people, and that the money follows the flow. So we're looking forward to keep in touch with you guys and then introduce companies to you guys, and you guys gonna introduce our companies, and then let's see how it goes. And then again, I'd like to see one day soon, maybe in 5 years, Japan will be playing much more important role in the global pharmaceutical and assembly development and medical devices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
ご登壇いただきました。ギャノン様、ミッチェル様、そして鍵本様、ありがとうございました。以上をもちまして、キーノートパネルを終了いたします。そして次のプログラムですが、準備を整えまして、11時15分の再開とさせていただきます。どうぞ今しばらくお待ちください。